Good. Thank you so much, Sean. Thanks, Wanda. Good morning, everybody. What an incredible sight to be up here. What a humbling sight to be up here, to see all of your beautiful faces. It's good for us to be together again and to worship the Lord like we did this morning. Incredible, incredible. It's my privilege to share this morning, and the title of my sermon is No More Walls. No More Walls. Now, as a church over the last year or two, there were a couple of topics that we've spoken about that involved increase, that topics around revival, even the building project. Our slogan for the building project is souls, not seats. The reality that there are still so many unreached people out there, people who don't know Jesus in our own city and in this region, that we really do anticipate and feel that there is a great move of God coming. And I don't want to put a time stamp on it, when it is or how it's going to happen or where, but we need to have our hearts prepared. And so, with the opening of this building on the 5th of December, Louis preached a message. Louis is one of the elders here, about one of the prophetic words that have been recurring over the years over us as a local church, from Isaiah chapter 42. And that speaks about enlarge the place of your tent. And so Louis spoke about enlarging our hearts for the harvest that God is sending, for the people that God is sending, the increase. And so I today also would like to have a look at one of the prophetic scriptures that has been given to us as a local church over the years. And that's from Zechariah chapter 2, verses 1 to 2. And it's important for us to speak about these things because many here don't necessarily know about these things, don't know about the prophetic direction that God has given to us as a church over the years. But also we need some of those who do know about those prophetic encouragements need remembrance, a reminding of those things, like I do. I need to be reminded every now and again of what God has said, to realign my heart and my thinking again with the direction that He has given us, and so that we can steer the church into the direction that He is steering us into. And so that we're not steering the church into any person's idea or any man-made thing, but we are steering the church, and we're heading together as a church into the direction and the future that God has for us, that He has revealed to us prophetically. And so Zechariah chapter 2, won't you please read with me from verses 1 to verse 5. Zechariah saying there, "And I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, a man with a measuring line in his hand. Then I said, 'Where are you going?' And he said to me, 'To measure Jerusalem, to see what is its width and what is its length.' And behold, the angel who talked with me came forward. And another angel came forward to meet him and said to him, 'Run, say to that young man, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as villages without walls, because of the multitude of people and livestock in it. And I will be to her a wall of fire all around, declares the Lord, and I will be the glory in her midst.'" Now, a little bit of background to this passage in Zechariah. Not a little bit, I'm going to try and give some detailed background so that we can get to understand the context from where this is written and then apply it into our context. Now, the southern kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Judah, was exiled by the hands of Babylon in the year 597. The first group of exiles was taken to Babylon in the year 597 BC, before Christ. And so the first group to return from exile was in the year 538 before Christ. And we read about that in the book of Ezra. And so this happened because between 597 and 538, Persia came and conquered Babylon. And so the king of Persia was the King Cyrus. And God had worked and stirred his heart that he should send back the Israelites to Jerusalem, that they would rebuild the temple of God in Jerusalem. And so Cyrus sent back with Ezra the first group of people to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. And so within the first year, they had finished with the foundation of the temple. Now we need to know that during this exile that Babylon came and took the people of Judah into Babylon, they completely demolished the temple. They completely demolished the walls of Jerusalem. That when they got back there in 538, there was nothing left. Jerusalem lay in ruins. That's why they had to, even with the temple, restart with the foundations, because there was nothing left. It was burnt down, completely demolished and destroyed. And so after the first year and they finished the foundation, the people started living again for themselves. They entered into a very, not such easy circumstances. There were famines and droughts. And so instead of building God's temple, they were more concerned with their own welfare. And so the building of the temple halted after the first year. And so 17, 18 years later, God raises up two prophets, Prophet Haggai and Zechariah, that we read about here, in the year 520 BC. And so God spoke through the two of them a similar message to the people of Jerusalem, that they must continue building the temple, that they must stop investing and building into their own homes, and that they must continue to build the dwelling place of God in Jerusalem. And so within 5 years, by the year 515 BC, they finished with the temple. Now, interestingly, this picture, this verse that we read, and this prophetic picture in Zechariah, speaks about Jerusalem will be a city without walls, or villages without walls, or towns without walls, depending on your translation. But in the year 445, Nehemiah went back to Jerusalem. So it's about 70 years later, with the task to rebuild Jerusalem's walls. And so it's about 70 years later, after the temple was finished, the walls were still, there was nothing going on. And 70 years later, Nehemiah goes back to rebuild the walls. And so at the beginning, the rebuilding of the walls obviously has a spiritual significance more than a physical significance. Because I believe obviously Nehemiah was God sent to go rebuild those walls. And so when God said Jerusalem will be a city without walls, it wasn't speaking about physical walls. It was speaking about the spiritual reality of the future of God and His church in the New Testament. And so what is the population of Jerusalem at that time? And so with Ezra, 538 BC, about 50,000 people went back with him to inhabit Judah and Jerusalem. And if we can have that picture up on the screen now, I don't know if it came through. Just to show you that when God speaks to Zechariah here and says the people will be so numerous, the livestock will be so numerous that it would overflow the walls. If we can just go back to the picture. The larger green portion is, sorry, I just took that picture out of my study Bibles. That's why it's not such a clear picture. But the larger green portion is what was inhabited of Jerusalem before the exile. And the portion to the right that is sort of highlighted there is the portion that was inhabited in the times of Ezra. And so the population was about only a third or a quarter of Jerusalem was inhabited. You can imagine the faith that it had to stir in Zechariah's heart when God said Jerusalem will be a city without walls because of the people and the livestock that will be so numerous. And so biblical commentators do agree, though, that Jerusalem here is a prophetic picture of God's New Testament church. That from Jerusalem, where God started the first church was birthed. God would send out the gospel to Judea, Samaria, and to the outer ends of the earth. And then wherever churches were planted in whichever town, country, or nation, they would be as villages that without walls, that are together under the reign of one King, Jesus Christ. And so it's as if they are one, but they are villages on their own, separate, but they're not walled in. Together they make one city under the reign of Jesus. And so if it is applied to every local church across the world that are like unwalled villages or unwalled towns that form together this one big city under the reign of Jesus, then it can be applied to us as a local church as well. And if it can be applied to us as a local church, it can be applied to the individuals of this local church, because it's the individuals that make up this local church. We are the body members of Christ. And so I'd like to have a look at a couple of elements from this vision that God gave Zechariah. The first element is the man with the measuring line. The man with the measuring line. Who is the man holding the measuring line? Most commentators agree that it is Jesus himself in this vision, because it is a prophetic picture of his church, that the gospel, the good news, that God didn't just come to save the Jews in Jerusalem, but that God came to save the world. And we know that there is one who builds his church, and that is Jesus. Jesus says, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. And so Jesus comes, and he is the one holding the measuring line. And I believe today still, he is the one walking amongst his churches, holding the measuring line, measuring the churches. We read in Revelation that he walks amongst his churches, the lampstands, that he is the one who walks amongst them. He sees us. He knows us. He is mindful of Church Unlimited here in Elspruit. He's got plans and purposes for us. And so he measures us. We also need to take into consideration that this measuring is not a negative thing. I tend to when someone comes and measures me, it's not always a positive thing. But within the context of this picture, it is something positive. It's not a rebuke. It's not a reprimand. It's not me going to the gym and they're measuring places where I feel uncomfortable and they bring me some bad news. Eh? It's not that type of measuring. It is an excitement about the future. God measured Jerusalem and he thought about the future, and he knew that the current capacity will not hold what he has for them for their future. And God was excited about it, because there were great things to come. And so if we take this into our context, Jesus comes and measures us. There is an excitement. There is an anticipation. Because just even the physical boundaries, which I don't like to talk about, God has more than doubled. Because there is an excitement about the future. And so when Jesus does come and measure, I said I don't like to talk about it. It's not measuring plot 99 of Machisdal, where this building is built. It's not what God comes to measure. He comes and he looks at us, his church, and measures our reach. He measures our influence. He measures our capacity to love more people, to reach more people, to take care of and to disciple more people. And he measured us, and I believe that God has measured, and he said that I need to create capacity, because there is so many more who I am going to send. They have been faithful with little, I will give them more to be faithful with. And so God measures and sees, and he's excited about the future, but he says, my son, my daughters, I need to increase. I need to enlarge. Your capacity needs to grow, because there is still more to come. I don't think we should believe that as a church, God has measured us, and now he thinks, you know what, they've reached enough, they've done enough, they've maxed out their capacity, and I'm just going to leave them where they are, because they're happy, I'm happy, well done, you just go on with what you're doing. No, God comes and measures and thinks there is still so much more. I want to enlarge your capacity. There is more. There is more, and he is excited about it. I know it. And so I believe it is for every individual that is a part of this church. Will you pray today and ask Him to increase your capacity, to reach one more, to love one more, to open up your heart for one more, to serve one more? Each and every one of us, God is saying, we will be villages, we will be towns without a wall. He knows and He sees each and every one of you, and He sees where you are, and He will meet you right there. And I don't know what your capacity looks like, but God wants to stretch it, and in His grace and in His love, He will stretch you beyond what you think you can do, but He does it in love. He does it in love. It's not a whip. You have to do more, do more, do more. God comes in love and says, if you know the future I have for you as a part of this church, even if it's just for one more, open up your heart. The second element is the increase in numbers that we see in this prophetic picture. Now, we again have to see that the increase in numbers is not a curse, it's a blessing. It's not seen in the negative light, it's brought in a positive light. The increase is something beautiful. One of the commentators, Matthew Henry, wrote this: the increase of the numbers of a people is a great blessing, is a fruit of God's blessing on them and an earnest of further blessings. Psalm 107 verse 38 says, they are multiplied, for He blesses them. When multiplication comes, when increase comes, when growth comes, it is a blessing from God. It is something we should embrace. It is something beautiful. It is something great. And that we shouldn't have these walls around us that says, no more increase, we're enough. There's not enough space anymore. Not just in this building, but in my life, in my heart. I don't know if will be able to deal with the increase. We as humans, at least for some, we like to have the same group of people around us. I know it's not the same for everyone. We don't like change that much. And it's not necessarily wrong to feel that way, because it involves your comfort zone. It just means that when change comes and when the increase comes, adapting to it will be easier for some than for others. But just because we have to adapt to the increase, it doesn't mean the increase is bad. Sometimes we have to adapt to the blessing that God pours. It is so lavish, it is so abounding that it's uncomfortable for us. But it's a blessing nonetheless. And we have to adjust and realign ourselves so that we can embrace the blessing of the increase that God gives us. And so when God gives increase, it is a blessing and we embrace it. Which brings me to the next element, which is the walls that are spoken about there. Now, I can preach a whole sermon just around God being the wall of fire around us. But something I do want to highlight. And so the truth is that though these more people could very possibly rock all our boats a bit, and that some walls that we have built up in our hearts would need to come down. I was trying to think of a relevant example where I would not highlight or single out any specific individual here. So forgive me for this example. If you feel like I'm singling you out, it's really not my intention. But maybe you are the best dishwasher in church. I tell you, people, they hardly put their cup of coffee down, their plate down, and you're there, and you take it. And when you wash it, man, you serve and you wash dishes like no one else. And then one day, all of a sudden, you're ready to go take that cup and it's already been taken. And you look around and all the plates and cups have been cleared up and you go to the kitchen and it's been washed. And it's shinier than ever. And you realize it's a new person. It's as a result of this increase that God has given. And all of a sudden it says, who's this person? Because I'm the dishwasher. I'm the one who cleans the dishes, and there's a wall of pride in your heart that needs to come down to welcome those that God is sending. There are other walls as well, walls of unforgiveness. God, just not that person, just not that group, because I still carry this thing in my heart towards them. Cultural walls. Hey, God, we will tolerate, but just don't ask me to invite them into my home. Cultural walls that God is challenging. Racial walls that God is challenging. Walls that we've built up in our hearts that we don't necessarily even know, but maybe even now God is highlighting it. Maybe it's just a little picket fence. And you think it's not that bad. Come on, look at that guy's wall. You know? When it comes to racism, let's call a spade a spade. Maybe your wall just looks like a picket fence and you're friendly. But is that wall completely broken down, destroyed, and is your heart completely open for anyone from any culture and any race? When God brings the increase. Economic walls. From those walls I've built up because it's uncomfortable to speak and to converse or to build friendship relationship with someone that doesn't fall in the same income class or more or less than what I do. We have economic walls that we've built in our hearts, and God says Jerusalem will be villages without walls. Comfort walls. It's when you become so comfortable with your space, and it often happens within connect groups. You know, we're just so happy as a little connect group. We know each other, who are these 10 new people that have joined our group? Now all of a sudden we can't sit in our home group leaders lounge anymore. Now we have to find another venue. They've made things uncomfortable and they are unwelcome because they've stepped on my comfort. Hey? Isn't that true? And now it probably means that our home group is going to have to split. Not in a bad way, but multiply because there's so much growth. And now all the people I've just learned to love so much, now all of a sudden, where are they? Comfort walls that God is challenging us. Will you allow me to come break those walls down and allow me to be the wall of fire around your heart? Because those walls, a lot of the times we put them up because we want to protect ourselves. Maybe we've been hurt, or maybe it's just because it's the way we've been brought up, and we have those walls there to protect ourselves, to protect our hearts. Even unforgiveness can be a mechanism to protect my heart because I was so hurt by that person. But God says, let me be the fire around your heart that protects your heart. Those walls that you have put there won't protect it the way that I can protect it. Let me be the wall of fire around you. Interesting, though, that Scripture says Jerusalem will be a city without walls, towns or villages without walls. And for me, it speaks about we shouldn't think that we have arrived. Ever. Not next year, not 10 years from now. And I'm not saying, you need to hear me, I'm not addressing the fact that I've now seen there are people with walls. I believe we are an incredible example of multicultural, multi-race, multi-age groups mixed here. It's beautiful what we see here. Honestly, it's beautiful, but it's something we need to continue to work on. It's not something we can ever think that we have arrived. And we're now at that place. Because of our sinful human nature, it is something we will always need to work hard for. Just like 70 years later, Nehemiah came and rebuilt the walls, and they did it in record time because of such incredible hard work and unity. Everyone worked together, the priests, the Levites, the women, the children, everyone had a share in building those walls. Sometimes they were building the walls with swords on the one hand and with building material, whatever, in the other hand. And so in the same way, we need to work hard at, we need to have unity, we need to pursue breaking down walls. There needs to be a continual breaking down of the walls because there is so much pressure amidst the breaking down the walls for us to build walls. So it's the opposite from what we saw in Nehemiah. Nehemiah, there was so much pressure against them to stop the building of the walls. In our day and age, there is so much pressure against us to stop the breaking down of the walls. The world wants villages that are walled up. The world wants you to wall up your heart and not allow anyone else in. And together we need to work hard and continue to work hard at this. The fourth element is the villages that are spoken about there. And so the picture here in Zechariah, and I mentioned it earlier as well, is that Jerusalem would become so big and that its inhabitants so numerous that it will no longer be considered to be one city, but different villages or towns that make up Jerusalem. And so, drawing that picture to the New Testament, the church spreading from Jerusalem, Judea to Samaria and to the outer ends of the earth. And this kingdom of God that was established under the reign of Jesus with these different local churches. And again, if we look at us as a local church, and so it's not just villages, all the different churches are villages, but even within us, there are villages, which are good. It's beautiful. And it doesn't matter the size of the church, though, because one might think, yes, it's applicable to us as a church now as we're growing, but when this church was planted, this year it's 27 years ago, Roland and Patty Barner from Scottborough faithfully came and planted. The first service was a church of 8 people in a garden flat. But in there were families represented, villages, towns, that had to let down their walls and allow the others into their space as well so that they could work together. Now, as the church has grown over the years, the dynamics of the villages have just changed. And yes, there are families represented here that are sort of like villages, and we need to be unwalled villages, open to everyone. It's not just me and my family. But it's grown beyond that now as well, where we have ministries and connect groups and prayer groups, men's groups, ladies' groups, and you can name it. And we have worship team, kids ministry, youth, welcoming and serving all over the spot. Go look at that table. I think there are 18 plus places where you can serve. And so there is a village for you. There is a town for you in this church where you can belong. And these villages all make up a part of Church Unlimited. It's not an entity on its own. Walled up. We are the worship team. Or we are the greeters and no one else is welcome. Why are you the greeter? Joking. So it's villages, unwalled villages where you find a place where you belong, where you are challenged, where you grow, where you are discipled, where you build friendship relationships with those around you. But that connect group, that ministry, whatever it is, forms part of the bigger city. Let's call it Church Unlimited. And that's on an individual, personal level here. But we need to lift up our eyes even beyond our own church and our congregation here. The Church Unlimited has multiple congregations, unwalled villages. In the Lowveld, we've got Church Unlimited White River, Hazyview, Kaapsewip. Now we've got Makoko, Mjijinini, Oakley in Bushbuck Ridge. Congregations there. One eldership, Alan and Dalian Parfit leads that eldership. And we are unwalled villages together. It's not me and my congregation and who are you guys. Incredible how God is using the different gifts in the different congregations. We share preachers, we share knowledge, finances, everything. When a church lacks, we give there, whatever it might be. But we aren't little walled up villages together. And so you make a part of one of the unwalled villages of Church Unlimited. And maybe God is stirring something in your heart to go support one of the other unwalled villages of Church Unlimited. the unwalled towns. Maybe God is stirring something in your heart to plant another Church Unlimited congregation in this region. I don't know. There's still Kanyamazan, there's Leidenburg, there's Hazy, Sabi, you name it. There are still so many places where God can send us. And so it's not just us here. When Sanani goes out, Sanani is Church Unlimited. It's not just because Craig and Brenda Rebro, who lead Sanani, is in Church Unlimited White River. Now, it's their thing. We are unwalled. It's our thing. We reach the poor and the vulnerable through Sanani into our surrounding areas. I want to ask you, have you found your place, your village, your town, where you belong within Church Unlimited? I tell you, it is so important for your spiritual growth, for your discipling, for your maturity. And if you are visiting us and looking into this church now, I want to say to you that is one of our core values is we want to disciple you. We want to see you grow. We want to see you mature. And that a Sunday morning is only but one of the small portions of us discipling you. But becoming active within one of the towns, villages, unwalled, as a part of Church Unlimited, is where you will grow. So I want to encourage you to become part of one. The fifth element is the glory within. The glory within. God says, I will be the glory within her midst. Now, we read in Ezra chapter 3. So I gave you a little bit of a background about Ezra. So Ezra was sent back with a task to rebuild the temple. They couldn't do it, and they delayed it. And so in Ezra chapter 3, we read from in verse 12, but many of the priests and Levites and heads of fathers' houses, old men who had seen the first house, who had seen the first temple, wept with a loud voice when they saw the foundation of this house being laid. Now the ESV Bible Study text note says this about that verse. It says, some of the very old remembered the former temple, Solomon's temple, and believed that this one would not match the glory of the former temple. And so what they were doing is they were comparing the former temple to the current temple. And they thought that this one won't ever be able to compare closely to the glory and splendor of the temple that Solomon built. The gold and the furniture, it was an incredible expensive exercise. Like you won't believe. It was a work of art. And I just thought the glory of the second one, it won't come close to the splendor and the majesty and the beauty of the first one. But what they were missed is that God says, I will be the glory in your midst. It doesn't matter what the temple, the building looks like. You need to remember that when you make much of something, you don't make much of a building. You don't make much of a place. You don't make much of a person. Anything that's man-made, for I will be the glory in their midst. When we make much of something, it is we make much of God. Doesn't matter what the place looks like where we gather. Doesn't matter who we are, where we come from. God says, I will be your glory. His presence, His life. No person or anything man-made should be the glory in our midst. The thing we brag about. The thing we make much about. But Jesus. To glorify Him is to make much of Him in our togetherness. And we need to remember that. It's this beautiful presence of God here this morning, even while we're preaching now as well. God in our midst. He is the glory. But Haggai spoke to the people as well about this thing. And he spoke about why the word of the Lord came through him. He says, why are the people building their own homes, but my dwelling place is unfinished. The place, and so the temple was the place where God's presence dwelt, where God's glory dwelt. Say, why have you not taken care of the place where my presence dwells? And so I'd like to apply it to our personal lives this morning. It's just like the people of Jerusalem, we can get very caught up in taking care of so many other things in our lives. But we end up neglecting the place where His presence dwells. If the place where His presence dwells in us, I am His temple. It's like a garden, unattended. You must have come and had a look at what my garden looked like after we've been away for a couple of weeks over December. It was full of weeds. The grass was this high. Because when we leave it unattended, it becomes like that. We allow other things to creep in there and to grow. And God says, take care of the place where I walk with you. My place of intimacy with you. Take care of that place. Guard your heart. In Proverbs we read, it says, guard your heart. And that guard your heart in the Jewish context, it wasn't just protect your heart. It was take care of your heart as you would of a garden. Guard your heart. Pull out the weeds. Make sure the place where you dwell with God in your personal relationship is a place that you go there often. A place that you take care of. A place where you honor His presence and His glory. God is Spirit, and we need to take care of the place where we commune with Him, where we walk with Him.